Rastafari, blessed love and greetings, family, in the name of the Most High, HaileSelassieI. We are here right now with another reasoning with seasoning. You know what I mean? We are reading from the wise mind of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I and reasoning on such matters, on such word, sound, power. Yeah. Now, in this video, I would like to read from chapter 15, International Relations. Following on from last time, we were reasoning on development. His Majesty was talking about disarmament of all the nations of the world, and I'm happy to say that in this video he continues to, burn such a fire. It's written in the Bible that Christ shall come with a double-edged sword to judge the nations. Now, if we think, what is that double-edged sword? We know it's the tongue. We know it's the words that come out of your mouth. We know it is word, sound, power. We know that you can beat up somebody worse with words than you can with physicalities and all these things, And look at when His Majesty went to the League of Nations, the words that he spoke, the way he judged the nations with the double-edged sword at that time. Yeah. So international relations, obviously, remember this is in the time of His Majesty. He's talking about Ethiopia, he's talking about Africa, he's talking about the nations of the world and the relations between such nations. Yeah. So family, His Imperial Majesty, wise mind of Emperor Haile Selassie I, His Imperial Majesty speaking on international relations, says right here, apart from the kingdom of the Lord, there is not on this earth any nation that is superior to any other. Apart from the kingdom of the Lord, there is not on this earth any nation that is superior to any other. The perpetuation of the status quo will not, in the long run, serve even the narrow interests of the few, and it will inevitably prove disastrous to the world economic situation. It is therefore to be ardently hoped that the governments of the economically advanced countries will rise to this challenge and join in a concerted effort to alleviate the world's economic ills, which are but the root and cause of many other international problems. Yeah, so once again, just like in the previous video, His Majesty is saying that it is the duty and the responsibilities of the great powers of the world to pool their resources and their funding towards alleviation of poverty, sickness, disease, ignorance, and all the things that are holding back humanity and that are particularly holding back certain parts of the world. Yeah, like we see here in Africa. We know what they did. We know why the situation is how it is. Check the previous video for more information. Forward. Many learned men have on various occasions sought to abolish war and establish an everlasting peace. Treaties have been signed and organizations formed to achieve this goal, but because they lacked guarantees, these efforts uniformly failed, and to gain their ends, countries even resorted to the production and use of poison gas. Now, nations are producing weapons which not only constitute a terrible danger to those against whom they might be used, but in fact could mean the end of mankind, and again there are no guarantees. If these awful weapons are used, who will bear the responsibility? In these circumstances, if man has not sought out the protection of God, as well as prepared himself for self-protection, the havoc and ruin that can be brought down upon the race of human beings is beyond the bounds of imagination. Yeah, His Majesty is obviously referring to the League of Nations in the first part, when he says that, certain organizations were set up to achieve peace between all nations of the world, and they uniformly failed to do so. Treaties have been signed. His Majesty could be referring there to the treaty that was signed in the time of Emperor Menelik II, and this is obviously what caused the Battle of Adwa, when the Italians changed the translation of their treaty to mean something else. Now I'm going to read this quote again because it's very important and very powerful. The word sound power is on point. So listen up, family. His Majesty says, many learned men have on various occasions sought to abolish war and establish an everlasting peace. Treaties have been signed and organizations formed to achieve this goal, but because they lacked guarantees, these efforts uniformly failed, and to gain their ends, countries even resorted to the production and use of poison gas, referring of course to the Italian invasion in Mussolini's time, where they broke international laws of war and used poison gas and other such means to rain havoc upon the people of Ethiopia and the nation. Yeah? His Majesty says, now nations are producing weapons which not only constitute a terrible danger to those against whom they might be used, but in fact could mean the end of mankind. And again, there are no guarantees. If these awful weapons are used, who will bear the responsibility? In these circumstances, if man has not sought out the protection of God, as well as prepared himself for self-protection, the havoc and ruin that can be brought down upon the race of human beings is beyond the bounds of imagination. Rastafari. The havoc and ruin that can be brought down upon the race of human beings is beyond the bounds of imagination unless the nations of the world stop manufacturing weapons, stop arming themselves, and stop putting funding towards war and nuclear weapons and all these things which only can result in destruction and death. There is no life, there is no solution that can come out of a nuclear weapon or out of any weapon for that matter. Yeah? Rastafari, we forward on international relations. His Majesty says global peace and security can only be permanently secured if all people of the world pool their resources towards the complete eradication of man's common enemies, ignorance, hunger and disease. Yeah? So similarly to what we were reasoning upon in the previous video, ignorance, hunger and disease, until these enemies have been defeated, there is nothing else worth achieving. So all of these people who want to fly to space and all the rest of it, there's nothing worth achieving until man's common enemies, ignorance, hunger and disease, have been defeated. Global peace and security can only be permanently secured if all people of the world pool their resources towards the complete eradication of man's common enemies, ignorance, hunger and disease. Yeah? Complete eradication of these common enemies. Rastafari. Small nations ought to refrain from making themselves tools for igniting friction between the great powers. We must work together for the ending of the little wars which are consuming the energies of the small nations and decimating our people. Today, the great powers should also wake up to the realization of the fact that the key to their destiny and future happiness does not lie in their own hands alone. There is no peace without cooperation. His Imperial Majesty speaking to the nations of the world, judging the nations with the two-edged sword. Today, the great powers should also wake up to the realization of the fact that the key to their destiny and future happiness does not lie in their hands alone. There is no peace without cooperation. Rastafari. Straight from the lion's mouth. Yeah? So His Majesty talks about the charter. I'm not sure exactly which charter, but one of the charters that they put together. Be it known that the principle enshrined in the charter and the resolutions adopted by the organization are not there only for the small nations to respect and implement. In efforts being made to ease the gravity of the world problems, the small nations should have a say. Their voices should be heard. Now, this can also be related to RUNN, Reform the United Nations Now. This is a book recently published by HaileSelassieI, which is using some of His Majesty's speeches such as this to show how there needs to be a reform within the United Nations, how there are 7 or 8 nations, I think, England, France, America, Germany, Italy, China, whoever they be, that have a veto power, which means that any of the small nations, when they vote on something, let's say 40 out of 50 nations vote for this. Well, any one of those big nations can cancel all those votes just because they're a big power. You know what I mean? So His Majesty is saying that the small nations should have a say and their voices should be heard and must be heard. You know what I mean? Rastafari. Differences in economic and social systems should not give rise to mistrust and misunderstanding among nations. On the contrary, we should accept diversity in culture and tradition and coexist peacefully. Remember, this is chapter 15, International Relations. His Majesty talking about, as humanity, as nations, how we can live with one another peacefully, how we can achieve peace on this earth. And he says differences in economic and social systems should not give rise to mistrust just because somebody comes from a different culture. Their social systems are different, the way they interact. Their economic situation might be different. This should not rise to mistrust and misunderstanding among nations. On the contrary, we should accept diversity in culture and tradition and coexist peacefully. Yeah? Okay, and so His Majesty is talking obviously about international relations. So here he mentions America, he mentions Japan. I'm going to read these quotes so that I then can see kind of the vibes that His Majesty was promoting at the time. Yeah. So he says that the American people can make a significant contribution to guaranteeing that a deep and abiding friendship exists between Africa and the United States of America. Learn more about us, learn to understand our backgrounds, our culture and traditions, our strengths and weaknesses. Learn to appreciate our desires and hopes, our problems, our fears. If we truly know one another, a solid and firm basis will exist for the maintenance of friendly relations. You may be assured that there will be no failure in the warm and brotherly response from our side. Of course, as always, Ethiopia stretching out her hand in the peaceful manner that His Majesty shows, setting the example of the Christ consciousness. Yeah, you may be assured that there will be no failure in the warm and brotherly response from our side. He speaks on Japan here. He says, we are impressed by the achievement of the Japanese people in reaching a most advanced technology and creating a most flourishing economy without losing their ancient virtues nor their traditional, personal and social values. Theirs is an example to be meditated upon and to be followed by other nations who are striving to solve their problems and to build their future in this troubled world. Yeah? And His Majesty says that cooperation among all nations of the world, East and West alike, is not only possible and desirable, but indispensable for the welfare of mankind. Yeah? I will read that again. Cooperation among all nations of the world, East and West alike, is not only possible and desirable, but indispensable for the welfare of mankind. Okay? And of course, in Japan, there is talking about the advanced technology creating a flourishing economy without losing the ancient values and the traditional personal and social values practiced by the people. Yeah. Now there's a quote here that says, if we remain faithful to the principles of Bandung and apply them in our international life, we will maximize the influence in which we can bring to bear on world problems. I'm not sure what His Majesty is referring to when he says Bandung. Me, myself, I need to research. If you know the answer, put it in the comments. If you have anything else to say, if you agree, if you disagree with anything we're saying, put it in the comments. Let's let the reasoning flow. You know what I mean? So we're reasoning on chapter 15, International Relations, the wise mind of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. His Majesty says the stake of each one of us is identical, life or death. We all wish to live. We all seek a world in which men are freed of the burdens of ignorance, poverty, hunger and disease. And we shall all be hard pressed to escape the deadly rain of nuclear fallout should catastrophe overtake us. Yeah, we're all in the same boat as humanity. Everybody seeks the same basic human needs. And if nuclear fallout should overtake, then the whole world faces the same catastrophe. So again, it is about disarmament of nations, removing from our minds the idea or possibility of war as a solution. Yeah? Rastafari. His Majesty says no system, not even that of collective security, can succeed unless there is not only a firm determination to apply it universally, both in space and time, but also whatever the cost. Yeah? So sometimes we've seen in history examples of ones who have stood up no matter the cost, maybe even their life, to promote what is true and what is right, and to stand up for the rights of humanity. Yeah? Family, we give thanks and praise. Powerful. We forward on. His Majesty says, nowhere can the call for aid against aggression be refused by any state, large or small. Again, he could be referring to what happened with the League of Nations in 1936. It is rather a universal principle, or it is no principle at all. Again, I would say, nowhere can the call for aid against aggression be refused by any state, large or small. It is rather a universal principle, or it is no principle at all. Yeah? The words, the teachings of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, Rastafari. His Majesty says here, to be sure, there exists throughout the world a sense that something must be done, and as well a belief that all should be done is being done. But in terms of the enormous resources squandered in wars, or in the amassing of weapons of destruction, or even devoted to the enthralling conquest of space, the amount which is allotted to bettering the existence of the individual in the developing world is little indeed. Now family, if you've been tuned into the previous videos, you would have seen us saying Fireburn Elon Musk enough times, and all those ones who are putting so much billions of dollars, billions of pounds, billions of euros, billions of whatever, putting it into traveling to space while there is still so much hunger and poverty. Like I say, fix the hunger, fix the poverty, bring all of humanity to an equal position, and then you can fly space. And like I said before, you don't have to come back if you don't want to. You know what I mean? But priority is family. Yeah? So I'm going to read that again, because that's a big quote. And again, His Majesty is talking about disarmament. To be sure, there exists throughout the world a sense that something must be done, and as well a belief that all that should be done is being done. But in terms of the enormous resources squandered in wars, or in the amassing of weapons of destruction, or even devoted to the enthralling conquest of space, the amount which is allotted to bettering the existence of the individual in the developing world is little indeed. Yeah? So priorities, family, as humanity. His Majesty says that all technological and scientific advancement must be used solely for the welfare of mankind. Otherwise it is worth nothing. Yeah? So until humanity is in an equal position, until all of humanity is got their basic needs being met, and even more than being met, food, clothes and shelter, yeah? Until the whole of humanity is living in an abundance, it don't make no sense to try and seek to achieve much else, because that's the mission. You know what I mean? That's the situation right now. Everything else will be achieved when that is achieved. We know that. You know what I mean? And until that's achieved, no achievement is really a great achievement. You know what I mean? So we're meditating upon the words, the teachings of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I, the wise mind. Go and get your copy of the book, Frontline Publishing, big up. Yeah, let's forward on right now. Let's see. His Majesty says, the sacrifices and the long bitter struggle of our empire for the defense and furtherance of the cause of collective security impose upon all nations alike the obligation rendered sacred by the lifeblood and sufferings of our people to ensure that war will not again sear the face of our fair lands, that justice and not expediency shall guide the councils of nations, and in the words of the Charter of the United Nations, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and in the equal rights of nations large and small. Rastafari. Hear this now. The world is only now coming to realize what Ethiopia and Africa have long recognized, that peace, independence, and prosperity of mankind can be achieved and assured only by the collective and united efforts of free men who are prepared to maintain eternal vigilance and labor unceasingly to protect these most precious of God's gifts. Yeah? One more time, family. The world is only now coming to realize what Ethiopia and Africa have long recognized, that peace, independence, and prosperity of mankind can be achieved and assured only by the collective and united efforts of free men who are prepared to maintain eternal vigilance and labor unceasingly to protect these most precious of God's gifts. Yeah? And sorry, in the quote before this, His Majesty, talking about how the United Nations was set up after the fall of the League of Nations. The United Nations was set up, and part of their charter is to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, which had been failed multiple times before. And His Majesty is saying that, our empire should never have to go through this kind of war and injustice again. And we pray that in the future, justice and not expediency shall guide the councils of nations. Yeah? Rastafari. To secure the equal rights of nations large and small. So we forward on. Internal relations, word, sound, power, the teachings of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. Those who lack the vision and foresight to realize that Africa is emerging into a new era, that Africans will no longer be denied the rights which are inalienably theirs, will not alter or reverse the course of history, but will not only suffer the inevitable consequences of their refusal to accept reality. Let me read that one again. Those who lack the vision and foresight to realize that Africa is emerging into a new era, that Africans will no longer be denied the rights which are inalienably theirs, will not alter or reverse the course of history. So those that refuse to accept this reality, it will not reverse, it will not stop what is inevitably happening, but they will only suffer the inevitable consequences of their refusal to accept reality. One day they will have to wake up, no matter how long they can be in denial. One day they will have to wake up and face reality, and we know Africa is on the rise. Yeah? So family, last quote right now, chapter 15, internal relations. His Majesty says, HaileSelassieI, Jah Rastafari, hear this now. In the midst of the strife and turmoil which marks Africa today, the African people still extend the hand of friendship. In the midst of the strife and turmoil which still marks Africa today, the African people still extend the hand of friendship. But it is extended to those who desire the progress and the political and economic freedom of African people, who are willing generously and without thought of selfish gain to assist us to our feet, that we may stand by their side as brothers. Rastafari, we give thanks and praise the teachings of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia, Nagus Nagast, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Jah Rastafari. Yeah? In the midst of the strife and turmoil which marks Africa today, the African people still extend the hand of friendship, but it is extended to those who desire the progress and the political and economic freedom of African people, who are willing generously and without thought of selfish gain to assist us to our feet, that we may stand by their side as brothers. His Imperial Majesty on internal relations. Yeah, Rastafari. Make sure you get yourselves a copy of the book, family. If you already have a copy, then you know what I mean, big up. You know Wagwan, we can study together. If you have anything you want to add to the reasoning, drop it in the comments below. Give us a like, a share, a comment, and all those things. Remember, it's good over evil. We stand for the victory of the Lion of Judah. Yeah, we stand for the victory of good over evil in all situations, in all manifestations. So we give thanks and praise once again. Forward on air, forward on line, forward again soon with the next video and next reasoning. If you have any questions, drop them below. In the meantime, give thanks and praise. Jah Rastafari. Love.